topic for this evening. And we decided on the topic of making sense of religion and this idea if there is only one God, why are there so many different religions? And the reason we focused on that was because that seems to be a question that a lot of people are asking. You know, people are trying to make sense of life and sense of their belief systems and so on. And so I thought, well, let's see what Vahid has to tell us because he's the perfect guy to do that. So please welcome Vahid.
Thank you.
And thank you for being here tonight.
Sure. Thank you very much. So, yes. So, I guess I'll go ahead and start. So as you can see, the topic is on the making sense of religion, and if there is only one God, why are there are so many different religions? And like you were saying, this is, I think, a topic that people today have really, I think, coming face to face with as the world is getting smaller and as we're kind of really coming up against a lot of the differences between religions, and people are kind of becoming polemic and drawing back into their own faiths and say, okay, well, this is the true faith and the other faith is wrong, and getting this really narrow-minded view, and so I thought it would be instructive to really address this question, because this comes up all the time if you begin to discuss and talk with people of different belief systems. A lot of people will throw this, I've heard this said on many occasions to me, and I thought it would be good to examine this carefully and come at it a little different way than maybe we usually have looked at this question. So I like to rephrase it just slightly differently, but I think the meaning is the same, and it opens up really what I think is at the core of this, which is, does the singularity of God require that religion be singular? And many who hold more traditional beliefs really take this as an axiomatic belief that this has to be true. And a lot of times if you listen to them, they'll say, well, why would God confuse and contradict himself? There's one God, he's going to say one thing, and that's it. And they pointing to Scripture, which seems to indicate that there's only this one revelation, and that's it. There's no more. And some examples of this, and that this is the only way, and that's it. No one else is, everyone else is not true. And like, for example, in Christianity, you hear many times, people cite Jesus and say, well, Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the light. No one gets through me. I'm sure many of you have heard that before. In Islam, they have the notion of the seal of the prophets, that Muhammad is the final revelation, and that's it. There's no more coming after it. It's over. And then even in Judaism, the part of the reason they objected to Christ was that he was changing the law of God. That the law of God is modified. He broke the Sabbath and these other things, and also so there's this idea there in Deuteronomy that the law of God is this unchanging thing that shouldn't be altered. However, if you draw back a little bit and you ask yourself, does this really make sense in light of what we understand about the universe? Okay, step back away from this, and I come at this assuming that at least we kind of believe in science here. I'm not going to debate questions of the age of the universe or things like that. I assume that we accept that, and that's kind of our beginning point here. And if you accept that and you look at the size of our universe, and the age of our universe, 14 billion years old, and there are countless number of galaxies and worlds that are out there. And now you say that on this little planet, out of all of those planets that exist, and only maybe a couple thousand years ago, God decided to reveal himself, and nowhere else, just there. Does this make any sense? I mean, it just defies any of the attributes and any of the notions that all of these religions claim that they think God has, that God is just. It kind of it's impossible. I would submit to you. It's just logically does not hang at all. If you believe that the universe, if you submit that you look up in the sky and you see all these planets and you see all these worlds that are countless that are out there, that God is now just going to be coming to Earth, this little lonely planet, and that's it. No more. Everyone else is forgotten about. It makes no sense. So I would submit to you that actually the opposite must be true if we accept the structure of the universe and how things are. That actually there must be, on the opposite, quite clearly an infinite number of revealers of God in both time and space. Given the size and the depth and all that we see, there has to be. And so clearly, revelation is not singular. It cannot be singular. It's impossible for it to be singular. It makes no sense. It just falls apart. So the next question is, why are these revelations so different? And how can we reconcile the differences that we see existing between them? There appears to be these multiple laws of God. Each religion has its law of God, its Sharia, that it holds to. And there are also, the different religions emphasize different attributes of the gods. They talk about, God in different ways. And even some people say, well, for example, Buddhism, they don't even have a concept of a God. How can that make sense? And there are multiple of these pathways to achieve salvation. And then again, there's, like I said before, this claim of exclusivity and finality that exists in many of these religions. So how do we handle this? Well, in the Baha'i faith, we have this wonderful idea, which Baha'u'llah has taught humanity, and it's a very, very powerful idea. This idea of progressive revelation. And I'll, since I can't say it better, I'll quote Baha'u'llah. He says, "The all-knowing physician has his finger on the pulse of mankind. He perceiveth the disease, and prescribeth in his unerring wisdom the remedy. Every age hath its own problem, and every soul its particular aspiration. The remedy the world needeth in this present day afflictions can never be the same as that which a subsequent age may require." So from this you see that, from his statement, that religious truth really is relative to the time and place that it's revealed. And he likens these revealers as divine physicians who come and prescribe a remedy, a social remedy, that is appropriate for that day and time. And because sicknesses change, because the illness and the malady that afflicts humanity is different from age to age, it's never the same. So those remedies must be different. And they're going to be different. And another thing which I find interesting is that really this idea of progressive revelation is an incredibly powerful thing, because it really allows us to explain, using this tool, explain very clearly and very rationally all the diversity that we see in the religions before us. Why is it that they have this different law? Why is it they looked at God this different way? Through progressive revelation. And in my mind, as a scientist, I almost think of this as very similar to the idea of Darwin's idea of evolution and natural selection, which permitted scientists to understand the diversity of human life that was able to be seen through the power of natural selection and evolution. And it could explain the diversity of natural organisms. So just as this idea, this theory was able to explain this diversity from the scientific realm, in my point of view, progressive revelation gives us that power to explain the diversity that we see in the religious world. To elaborate more on this, I'd like to quote Shoghi Effendi. This is from Dispensation of Baha'u'llah, and it really kind of nicely summarizes really the core of what we believe about progressive revelation and really the nature of how religions move and what the Baha'i faith teaches about this. So he goes, its teachings, referring to the Baha'i faith, revolve around the fundamental principle that religious truth is absolute, is not absolute but relative, that divine revelation is progressive, not final. Unequivocally and without the least reservation, it proclaims all established religions to be divine in origin, identical in their aims, complementary in their functions, continuous in their purpose, indispensable in their value to mankind. All the prophets of God, asserts Baha'u'llah in the Kitab-i-Iqan, abide in the same tabernacle, soar in the same heaven, are seated upon the same throne, utter the same speech, and proclaim the same faith. From the beginning that hath no beginning, these exponents of the unity of God and channels of his incessant utterance have shed light of the invisible beauty upon mankind, and will continue to the end that hath no end, to vouchsafe fresh revelations of his might and additional experiences of his inconceivable glory. To contend that any particular religion is final, that all revelation is ended, that the portals of divine mercy are closed, that from the dayspring of eternal holiness no sun shall rise again, that the ocean of everlasting bounty is forever stilled, and that out of the tabernacle of ancient glory the messengers of God have ceased to be made manifest, would indeed be nothing less than sheer blasphemy. So he's very clearly saying, that this is a process which always goes on and will always go on. And it's really, like I was saying before, impossible, I think, for us to believe that it couldn't be so if you believe in a God, and if you believe the universe is built the way it is. So in light of this, I thought it's instructive now, with this new principle in our mind of progressive revelation, to now go back and re-examine these old religions and see if we can understand them in light of this, and sift and sort through them. So if we consider religious history in this light, we can see there are many elements of this concept that already exist in these previous revelations, if you look carefully enough. So, for example, if you look at the Christian Bible, what do you see? You see that the Christian Bible narrates this history of revelation, evolving from the Old Testament, which focused on the law and the prophets and was very severe in its initial outlook, and then moved to Christianity, which was more focused on this question of forgiveness and love. And you have also in there many examples of God changing the laws. So clearly the laws can be changed because God changes them from age to age. So for example, Jesus broke the Sabbath. He changed the law of divorce. If the law was eternal, then he shouldn't be needing to change it. Similarly, if you look in the Quran is even more clear in this, that it really links all of these revelations, all the Judeo-Christian revelations in this continuous belief system, and he even calls them by one name. He says, well, they're all Muslims. So he refers to Jesus as being a Muslim. He refers to Abraham as being a Muslim. He refers to all of these individuals as following Islam. And again, you have in Islam this idea of the law being changed. And one very important example of this is when Muhammad changed the location of the Qibla. So it used to be Jerusalem, and that's how it was in the past. The Jews, it was Jerusalem. And then one day, he received a revelation, and God decided, oh, it's Mecca. So this is not, again, another example. The law of God is not this inviolable thing that doesn't change. It changes. Now in Hinduism, this idea actually is much easier because honestly, this concept already exists in a very mature form, in the idea of the recurring avatars. And this is basically straight out of the Bhagavad Gita if you read it. In the Gita it says, whenever there is decay of righteousness and there is exaltation of unrighteousness, then I myself come forth for the destruction of evildoers. For the sake of firmly establishing righteousness, I am born from age to age. And likewise, since Buddhism, this is one thing I think people forget when they say, okay, Buddhism is maybe an atheistic religion or whatnot. Buddhism is not in isolation. The Buddha was not a Buddhist. He was a Hindu. He grew out of the Hindu matrix, just like Jesus was a Jew, So all the baggage of theology, it was assumed that he believed in and that he came out of and he accepted. So really what Buddhism represents is a reaction to and a correcting of what was going on in Hinduism at that time. And it should be understood from that point of view. So likewise, the idea in Buddhism also, they have this idea of this recurring event of the bodhisattva, this individual who comes from time to time and bring enlightenment to humanity. So we see in all of these religions, these ideas are really potentially there and really there. And then Baha'u'llah has really kind of flipped this out and made it very clear. And indeed, all the dominant religions speak of a future revelation of God. There's not a single one of them that doesn't say, well, in the future there's going to be something else. Despite the apparent claims of finality that each of them, you find that they seem to say, like in Islam, he's the seal of the prophets and whatnot, still they speak that in the future, in Judaism, the Messiah is supposed to come. In Christianity, the return of Christ is supposed to come. In Islam, the Mahdi is supposed to come. In Hinduism, the 10th avatar, and in Buddhism, the 5th Buddha, and also Zoroastrianism, which I haven't talked really much about. There's the Shah Brahman. So traditional interpretations, though, have always held that whenever a future revelation would come, or it would appear, that they're going to uphold the same laws, that the law is not going to change. And also that it's going to occur in this really fantastic way, that really, it's going to come from the sky, that the earth is going to quake, and they have all these fantastic things that they expect that this person, when he comes, that this is going to happen. And so it just it's natural then that when you look through history and you see that each of these new revelations occur, always the old one is rejecting them. So, for example, you see that in Judaism, most of the Jews didn't accept that Jesus was the Messiah because he didn't come in the way that they thought he should be coming. He's breaking the Sabbath. He's claiming things about himself that really he shouldn't be because that's only God can do that. And all these things, it's not right. And similarly, Christians, they rejected Muhammad as fulfilling the gospel. No, he's doing things that he shouldn't be doing, It's just not right, and so on. And it's always that's kind of the natural way of things. So to kind of conclude some of the ideas that we've dealt with here, I think it's quite clear that the existence of it's really, I think, been proven here, I think, conclusively, that the existence of multiple religions and revealers has to be a natural consequence of living in this very large and old cosmos that we inhabit. You can't get rid of that. You can't get around that. And that the differences in laws and teachings between these revelations can be interpreted as differences between the age and place that they were revealed in, because they change. And in each of these revelations, you saw that happen. There's examples of this happening. And progressive revelation, in my humble opinion, would seem to be the really natural mechanism that explains and can differentiate these different religions and explains why they are different from each other, why it is that they change. And